In the summer of 1944, a French farmer stood near his fields, staring in disbelief. He watched as an American soldier walked up to a massive M4 Sherman tank, a 30-ton beast of steel and firepower. The farmer expected the soldier to climb inside or maybe perform some maintenance. Instead, the soldier bent down, grabbed the front of the tank with a few other men, and simply lifted it. They casually repositioned the armored vehicle as if it were a piece of lightweight furniture. The farmer's eyes widened in confusion. How could just a handful of men lift a machine that should weigh more than a house? This was his first bewildering encounter with the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, a unit unlike any other in the United States Army. What the farmer witnessed was not a display of superhuman strength, but a carefully orchestrated illusion. The tank was not made of steel, but of rubber, inflated with air like a child's oversized balloon. The soldiers were part of a top-secret unit known as the Ghost Army. Their mission was not to fight with bullets and bombs, but with imagination and trickery. They were a traveling roadshow of deception, tasked with fooling the German High Command into seeing a powerful American force where there was only air and ingenuity. Their battlefield was the enemy's mind, and their success would be measured not in territory captured, but in lives saved through clever misdirection. This strange scene, repeated across the battlefields of France, Belgium, and Germany, was the Ghost Army's signature act. It represented the core of their strategy, to create a believable phantom force that could draw enemy fire, hold a thin line, or mimic a massive troop buildup to send the Germans scrambling in the wrong direction. These soldiers were masters of stagecraft, using the European landscape as their theatre of war. They understood that if the enemy believed 1,000 tanks were rumbling over a hill, the effect was just as powerful as if the tanks were actually there. Their work was a high-stakes performance where a single mistake could cost thousands of lives. The existence of this unit was one of the most closely guarded secrets of World War II. While other GIs fought with rifles and artillery, these men wielded paintbrushes, speakers, and scripts. Their bravery was of a different kind. They often operated dangerously close to the front lines, sometimes holding a position with nothing more than inflatable decoys and sound effects to protect them. The soldier lifting the rubber tank was not just playing a trick, he was part of a grand, life-saving deception, a testament to the idea that sometimes the most powerful weapon of war is a well-told lie. This was the strange and remarkable story of the Ghost Army. The Ghost Army was not filled with typical soldiers who had trained for years in combat drills and marksmanship. Instead, the US Army recruited a very different kind of man for this unique and secretive mission. They scoured art schools, advertising agencies, and sound engineering studios across the nation, looking for creative thinkers. The unit was a motley crew of painters, architects, set designers, sound engineers, and actors, men who, in civilian life, might be designing department store windows or creating radio shows, suddenly found themselves on the front lines of the war. Their artistic talents, once used for commerce and culture, were now repurposed for military deception on an epic scale. Their primary mission was simple in concept, but incredibly complex in execution to impersonate other, much larger US Army units. By creating the illusion of a massive force, they could fool the Germans into moving their troops away from the real Allied attacks. This meant the Ghost Army could make a force of 1,100 men appear to be a full division of 15,000 or more. They would arrive at a location, set up their elaborate show, and then quietly slip away in the night, leaving the Germans to contend with a phantom threat. This strategy saved countless lives by diverting enemy resources and attention, allowing actual combat units to advance with less resistance. These artist soldiers had to become experts in the art of military imitation. They studied the specific symbols, patches, and vehicle markings of the divisions they were impersonating. They learned the habits of different commanders and how their units typically behaved. It was a form of method, acting on a grand scale. When they arrived in a French town, they had to look and act the part convincingly. They would sew the correct divisional patches onto their uniforms and paint the right bumper markings on their jeeps. Every detail mattered because a single inconsistency could unravel the entire deception and put real soldiers at risk. The men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops understood the gravity of their work. They were not just playing soldiers, they were protecting them. By drawing enemy artillery fire toward their own empty, decoy-filled positions, they were quite literally putting themselves in harm's way to shield their comrades. They combined the courage of a frontline soldier with the creativity of an artist, proving that battlefield success could be achieved through ingenuity as well as brute force. This army of dreamers and designers became one of the war's most effective and most secret weapons against the German war machine. The Ghost Army's toolbox was filled with props designed to fool the eyes and ears of the enemy. Their most famous tools were the inflatable tanks, artillery pieces, and airplanes. Made of rubber and inflated with air compressors, these decoys could be set up in a matter of hours to create the impression of a massive armored division getting ready for an attack. From a distance or from the cockpit of a German reconnaissance plane, these rubber dummies were nearly indistinguishable from the real thing. To complete the illusion, soldiers would use tractors to create fake tank tracks in the dirt, making it appear as if heavy vehicles had been moving all over the area. But visual deception was only half the battle. The Ghost Army knew that an army makes noise and silence would give their ruse away. To solve this, they employed a sophisticated sound deception unit. Engineers had traveled to Fort Knox to record the distinct sounds of dozens of military units. They captured the clatter of tanks on the move, the rumble of truck convoys, the shouts of soldiers building pontoon bridges, and the orders of officers. These recordings were then pressed onto state-of-the-art wire recorders and played back through massive speakers mounted on trucks. The sound trucks could project these noises up to 15 miles, creating a convincing audio illusion of a division in the move. The combination of sight and sound was what made the deception so effective. A German scout hiding in the woods might see what looked like a column of Sherman tanks in the valley below. Then he would hear the unmistakable roar of their engines and the clanking of their treads, seemingly confirming what his eyes told him. To add another layer of realism, the Ghost Army soldiers would intentionally create small, believable imperfections. They would scatter old oil cans, leave behind fake paperwork, and even set up laundry lines with uniforms bearing the insignia of the unit they were impersonating. These small details made the big lie much more believable. This multisensory approach was a form of psychological warfare. The goal was to overload the enemy's intelligence-gathering capabilities with false but highly convincing information. By manipulating what German scouts saw and heard, the Ghost Army could control what German commanders thought. They could make a weak point in the Allied line appear strong, or they could create a phantom army preparing for an attack in one location to draw attention away from the real assault, happening miles away. Their mastery of these deceptive tools turned the battlefield into a stage where they directed the enemy's every move. Beyond the visual and auditory tricks, the Ghost Army utilized the invisible world of radio waves to deepen their deception. A special unit within the 23rd was dedicated to spoof radio, which was really a clever game of electronic mimicry. These soldiers would generate fake radio traffic, imitating the communication patterns of the specific US Army division they were impersonating. They knew that German intelligence was constantly listening in on Allied radio channels, always trying to pinpoint the location of different units. The Ghost Army's radio operators would broadcast nonsensical or coded messages that sounded, well, totally authentic, fooling the Germans into believing a large force was operating in their area. This required incredible attention to detail. Different radio operators have unique styles of tapping out Morse code, a fist as it was called. The Ghost Army's operators had to study and replicate the specific fist of the operators in the unit they were replacing. If they were impersonating the 6th Armored Division, their radio traffic had to sound exactly like the 6th Armored Division's real operators. This level of authenticity ensured that German radio intercept units would confidently, but incorrectly, report the location of a major Allied force, leading their commanders to make disastrous strategic decisions based on completely false information. The deception did not stop with technology. It extended to live performance. Soldiers from the Ghost Army would drive into nearby French towns and put on a show for any local civilians and potential spies. They would visit cafes and bars, talking loudly about their fake unit and their non-existent plans for an upcoming attack. Some soldiers were even selected for their ability to impersonate high-ranking officers. They would drive around in a general's jeep, complete with official-looking flags and a serious demeanor, to give the impression that a division headquarters had been established nearby. This human element of the deception was crucial for making the illusion feel real and tangible. These strategies offer a timeless lesson in security and misdirection. In modern life, deception can be a powerful tool for protection. For instance, instead of just hiding valuable data, a company might create a decoy server filled with fake but tempting information to lure and trap hackers. This is far more effective than simple concealment because it actively misleads and confuses the adversary. The Ghost Army taught us that creating a convincing false target is often a better defense than trying to be invisible. By actively managing what the enemy sees and believes, you can control their actions and keep what truly matters safe. In March of 1945, the Allied forces faced one of their most formidable challenges, crossing the mighty Rhine River into the heart of Germany. The Germans were determined to defend this natural barrier to the last man. The US 9th Army was tasked with making a massive and dangerous crossing near the town of Rheinberg. To increase their chances of success and reduce casualties, the Ghost Army was called upon to perform its most critical mission, codenamed Operation Viersen. Their objective was to draw German attention and firepower away from the real crossing point by faking an entirely different assault 10 miles to the south, near the city of Viersen. The Ghost Army deployed every trick in their extensive playbook. They amassed over 600 inflatable tanks and artillery pieces, arranging them in convincing formations to simulate 2 full armored divisions preparing for an attack. At night, their sound trucks broadcast the noises of bridge construction and troop movements echoing through the river valley. During the day, their soldiers drove jeeps and trucks in loops to create the illusion of constant activity, while radio operators sent a flood of fake messages to convince German intelligence that a major offensive was imminent. The performance had to be perfect, as thousands of lives depended on its success. The deception worked better than anyone could have hoped. The Germans completely fell for the ruse. Convinced that the main Allied thrust would come at Viersen, they repositioned 2 entire panzer divisions and several artillery battalions to face the Phantom Army. They unleashed a furious artillery barrage on the Ghost Army's empty, decoy-filled positions, wasting thousands of shells on rubber tanks and unoccupied fields. All this time, the real US 9th Army was preparing to cross the Rhine 10 miles to the north, facing a significantly weakened German defense. The Ghost Army had successfully drawn the enemy's strength away from the decisive point. When the 9th Army finally launched its real assault, they met far less resistance than anticipated. The crossing was a resounding success, and a critical bridgehead into Germany was established with minimal casualties. The Ghost Army's elaborate performance had saved an estimated 10,000 to 30,000 Allied soldiers' lives. Yet, their heroism remained a secret. Due to the classified nature of their tactics, the story of their greatest triumph, and indeed their very existence, was locked away for over 50 years. Their contribution to winning the war remained unknown, a silent testament to their quiet bravery. The story of the Ghost Army is more than just a fascinating footnote in the history of World War II. It's a powerful reminder that imagination and creativity can be as decisive as any weapon. These soldiers proved that battles are not only won with overwhelming force, but can also be won through cleverness, ingenuity, and the courage to think differently. They understood that war is fought on a psychological as well as a physical battlefield. By manipulating the perceptions of the enemy, they were able to shape the reality of the conflict, turning the Germans' own intelligence against them and achieving victory with minimal bloodshed. Their legacy endured in military strategy long after the war ended, even while their specific story remained a secret. The principles of tactical deception, misdirection, and psychological operations became fundamental components of modern military doctrine. The idea of using technology to create convincing illusions, whether through electronic warfare, cyber operations, or advanced decoys, has its roots in the simple but brilliant innovations of the Ghost Army. They were pioneers who demonstrated that information, both real and fake, could be weaponized to achieve strategic goals and protect soldiers on the ground. The declassification of their story in 1996 finally allowed the world to appreciate their unique contribution. For decades, these veterans could not even tell their own families about what they did during the war. They were artists, designers, and actors who went to war and used their creative talents to fool the enemy and save lives. Their story is a tribute to a different kind of soldier, one whose bravery was found not in a charge against an enemy machine gun, but in holding a vulnerable position with nothing but inflatable props and a sound system, hoping the enemy would fall for the trick. Ultimately, the Ghost Army teaches us a lasting lesson about the power of the human mind. In a conflict defined by industrial might and destructive power, this small unit showed that cleverness could be a great equalizer. They remind us that innovation often comes from unexpected places, and that the most creative solutions can arise in the face of the greatest challenges. Their legacy is not just in the battles they influenced, but in the enduring principle that sometimes the most effective way to win a fight is not to overpower your opponent, but to outthink them with a stroke of brilliant, life-saving imagination.